Today, November 11th, 2002, we are interviewing Montgomery County Councilman Tommy Thompson, who's a Purdue University graduate who taught at Tuttle Middle School and coached basketball, football.
No, not football. Baseball.
Baseball and golf.
Yeah. And athletic director.
And it was athletic director. Tommy, I understand you served in the Korean War.
Well, let me state right off the bat that I did not qualify for a combat infantryman's badge. I was in Korea, but I was there really after the main shooting was done. They were still talking, and I'm eligible for the American Legion, but I want to say right off the top that you're not talking to a combat infantryman.
That I understand. Tommy, where were you June 25th, 1950?
I remember that vividly. I had a date, and I was at the drive-in east of Crawfordsville.
The drive-in east of Crawfordsville.
Yes, and I'd heard the news before I went on this date. So, by the way, it wasn't with my wife, so we'll let that go pretty quick. But it didn't mean anything. I mean, here I wasn't in college yet, and it just didn't mean that much.
Were you a high school senior at that time?
Actually, I'd already graduated, and so I had already been admitted to Purdue, and it was in the summer, and really, basically, I was ready to go to Purdue.
You were ready to go to Purdue. Were you drafted?
I was drafted only after I'd served 2 years first of all, in the ROTC, which everybody that went to Purdue was required to be in ROTC. That made me had a deferment for 2 years. The second 2 years, you had to pass or had to be in the top such and such in your class, and then there was a test that you had to pass. And luckily, I passed the test, and I did not sign up to go into officers training. One, because my grades weren't that good, and two, they were killing second lieutenants pretty fast in Korea, and I'd rather would have been drafted than gone as an unprepared second lieutenant.
That was a very wise decision.
I thought so at the time, anyway.
Where'd you take your basic?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. After basic, where were you stationed?
Right after basic, as a matter of fact, I was trained to be a combat engineer, which is kind of a joke. I went right from graduating in a class of a combat engineer battalion right straight to Fort Lewis, Washington. And from Fort Lewis, Washington, I was in Japan for 8 months.
Where were you in Japan?
In Japan, I was at the old Naval Academy of Japan, and it was called Ida-jima, not Iwo, Ida-jima.
Ida-jima. And was that near Sasebo?
No, we weren't too far from Sasebo, but Sasebo was south of us. This was right across the bay from Hiroshima.
Did you ever get to Hiroshima?
Yes. I played baseball there.
You did. Did you ever go by the RTO and see those people's shadows engraved on the wall from the atomic blast?
No, we played baseball there in May, and it was May Day, and so we went to the field, played, got on the bus, and went home because the communists were having their May Day celebrations, and we really shouldn't have been there, but they had it scheduled, and it was far enough out to the edge of the city, and the city was just starting to be, this was in 1954, the city was just starting to really be rebuilt. Still a lot of shanties.
What was the name of the outfit you were with at Ida-jima?
Well, I was with a couple, actually. I was going to a specialist school, so we were just assigned to the specialist school. We were in a company, but it was a headquarters company, and all it was almost like going to college. You marched to class, and you had to fall out every morning and take head count, but really I had a easy time in Japan.
Then when did you get to Korea?
Got to Korea in '55. We helped close down that specialist school, and I went to Tachikawa and flew out of Tachikawa and in Tokyo and landed in K-14 right outside Incheon.
Right outside Incheon. Then from Incheon, where were you stationed? Where did you report?
I was assigned to the 14th Engineer Battalion, which is right outside Uijeonbu, Korea.
Uijeonbu. Was that, how far were you from the 38th?
Maybe 25 miles.
25 miles.
Yeah. Uijeonbu was I-Corps headquarters, and the 14th Engineer Battalion was attached to I-Corps. We were responsible for putting in bridges, keeping up Road 1A, which ran right straight north of Seoul. This was the main road that the North Koreans and the Chinese came down, which happened a good while before I was there. But as I was telling you before when we talked, we were located right on the side of a mountain. I was in headquarters company, and we had two companies besides headquarters company. Our Able company was about 10 miles north of us. Why that arrangement, I have no idea. But our position was right over this, I call it a hill, they call it a small mountain. And that hill was evidently prime location because it controlled the road running out of Seoul. And there was armament which had been denuded, but we made some trips up that hill from time to time and for radio. And there was Turkish, American, Chinese shell casings all over the place, so that thing must have taken a lot of effort to retake, simply because that was a main
supply route.
Well, it was the main supply route, but this hill evidently controlled the valley, and it wasn't like Japan.
I'm sure.
But hey, there was nobody taking shots at me. The first night I got there, we had guys that had not had their full 16 months in, and they hadn't been in enough combat that they got their time in. 16 months that was your limit, unless you had enough combat engagements that they could send you home. So these guys were just the in-between, because there was hardly any companies that went over there as one unit and stayed very long. Everybody was funneled in and out as replacements. So I never was with anybody. I was there 10 months, and there was very few guys that I got to know really well, because half of them were going home and another half was coming in. But
you said at one time you were under hostile fire. Where was that?
Well, Alex, I don't want you to put it that way. I was going to say, the first night I got there, well, some of these guys that were getting ready to go home, if they were on guard duty, believe me, you had better know the password, because if it moved, they shot at it. What we had while I was in Korea was guerrillas. They were just a wild bunch, and they stole everything. And so to get in, we had air mat, that is what was airfields that we had constructed before I got there. The extra air mat we had around our perimeter. And this perimeter included just headquarters company, but right next to us was Baker and Charlie, and they had their own. So one great big compound. But still, those people would either climb over or tunnel under. They wanted gasoline, they wanted motor oil, they wanted anything that they could make yak juice out of, which was their whiskey. They couldn't get to our weapons. When I first got there, you slept with your weapon. By the time I left, you had to turn them all into supply.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Those last few months I was there, I was hoping nobody was going to do anything, because by the time you draw your weapon out of supply, things already happened. But that's how much it had changed.
Tell me this, Tommy, did you ever dare go off the compound after nightfall?
Not without a weapon. A couple of times we had, well, I was going to tell you about the first night there. I didn't any more than get there, got in, got a bunk, and somebody let off with those old grease guns. And man, when you're used to easy living and you hear all that going on, I was underneath my bunk, and Fine has heard me say this before, man, my buttons was in the way. I was scared to death. We had a couple of instances where we had a stream that ran by the outside of our compound. We had dammed that up so that we could take that water, which was terrible, and our battalion was responsible for a water purification plant. So those guys that ran that water purification plant were outside the compound. Now they had their own little compound of concertina wire and this sort of thing, but they got knocked over all the time. Joe Platt, a friend of mine from Kokomo, was assigned to that, and he woke up one night with a kid with a .45 right, pointing him right in the head, shaking so bad that he could hardly hold it. And Joe said, "Take anything you want, it's yours, just take it and go." Now, that happened more than once. And one time, I was on Corporal of Guard, which fortunately I didn't have to serve very often, and the guys called up and said, we're being robbed. They didn't say under attack, they just said we're being robbed. So we fell everybody out, and the second lieutenant that was in charge of the guard, we poured arms and went out the gate, and he said, I don't want to hear anybody click anything up to the chamber. We didn't more get out the gate. Click, 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 click. Everybody put one in the chamber. So since I was a communication type person, I had to find the landline that ran back, and so we had guys up on a couple of hills with flashlights and stuff, and I had 2 or 3 guys standing around me while I was fixing the line. That happened all the time. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that very much.
Tell me, when did you rotate back to the ZI?
Well, I might say that I got my job with Crawfordsville High School Crawfordsville Community Schools, I should put it that way, while I was still in Korea. My wife worked for a telephone company, and she, from time to time, her and the girls would go across the street to the restaurant to have coffee, and a couple of school board members were in there, and she overheard them talking that there'd be a possibility of an opening of a baseball coach. So she put in her 2 cents, and I signed a contract while I was still in Korea. I felt pretty fortunate about that.
That was, boy, you were lucky. Tell me, Tommy, when you got home, what was the attitude of the people here about your being in Korea?
It was what you're supposed to do. It was, my mom didn't like it very well, but it was what you're supposed to do. I got drafted, and I was married on June 20th, and I got drafted on August 15th, and I left on August 30th or something like that. So my married life was kind of short before I left. But hey, I know so many guys that were drafted before me and went over, and the guy right across the street from me served in World War II as a first lieutenant, and was and Don knows about this. They never were let out of the Army. They were on recall all the time. He had to go back. He was on front line, and he was on front line for quite a while, and was a captain.
Is he still alive?
No, he's not. And however, he survived that and got home, but he's passed away now, as a number of guys that served.
You know, it's interesting, Tommy. When I got out July of '52 and went back to the University of Illinois, and people told me I was a damn fool that I ever served in Korea. The fact that I felt I was ordered to go, I was fulfilling what the government wanted me to do, did not impress them. They had the idea that Syngman Rhee was a great Democrat.
I saw Korea from a number of different angles. I've waded through some patties to fix telephone lines. The capital of Korea was still a wreck. I mean, it was bombed out.
Right.
Seoul was nothing but shacks. Syngman Rhee was a tough old bird.
Very true.
And I don't know, I can't talk politically, I can't say too much one way or the other about him. There were a lot of Koreans that thought a lot of him, but there were a lot of Koreans that obviously that didn't.
That's
and
true.
If it hadn't been for us, they would be communists now, still.
Yes.
And I say us, and I really mean the United States. That's one of those wars that probably wasn't very popular either, and we had some units that performed admirably. We had some other units later on that probably didn't match up. I can't brag about our unit as far as morally is concerned, because at this time we were there to do a job. We got the job done, but I'm not saying that our morale was too high, especially at the last. See, everything from the time of late '53, when they started talking, then we could have absolutely nothing new. Now, by new, I mean it couldn't be a new type of equipment. We had to replace some things in our communication section. You took that out, and you got something back that was the same. There was no new armament, nothing. When I left Incheon to go home, I left. There were so many guys leaving, and there was a Russian standing there counting them, and there were so many guys coming in.
That's interesting.
There was you couldn't have it, you couldn't reinforce anything, you couldn't have any. We went through some games, I called them, where we were supposed to be on a defensive position. That was a joke. If they'd ever massed and come down through there again, there'd been no way we could have stopped it, in my opinion.
That's interesting.
We were just there as a unit to rebuild roads. And the way I saw it, we didn't have enough defense. We were building roads for the north, if they ever want to come back down through it again. Because we fixed up all the bridges, we did everything, and I didn't know. I'd go to Seoul a few times. I probably went to Seoul maybe a dozen times to pick up supplies. There were checkpoints, but I didn't see of any fortifications. I didn't see anywhere where it looked like the bridges were ever mined or in preparation to go. And I want to tell you, I was in a Jeep, and those guys waved us through half the time without really stopping us and seeing what was going on.
That's interesting. Tommy, was this road paved or was it a gravel road?
No, it was gravel.
I remember those gravel roads.
Yeah,
boy, they'd tear up tires like nothing.
No, nothing was paved. The bridge, there were still some big timbers in the bridge going into Seoul from the south, where it had been bombed and blown up. K-14 was that was interesting. I got off the plane and, geez, there's the machine gun nest. And after coming from being so soft in Japan, and the smell. Man, the
From
smell.
the rice paddies.
Oh, yeah. It was...
Night soil was their fertilizer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
No, it's something we won't forget, Tommy. It was an experience.
Yeah, sure. At the time, I don't like it. But now that I look back on it, I got quite a bit out of it. I feel like that. First of all, I got called. I did what I was supposed to do, and there was at that time I didn't know anybody other than doing some bitching that's ever thought about going over the hill or anything like that. That was a different time.
That's true.
Yeah, a different time.
Thank you very much, Tommy. I'm glad you came in.
Been a pleasure.
Loran K. Rutledge, Montgomery County Veterans Affairs Officer and Crawfordsville City Councilman. Loran is a veteran of both World War II and Korea. Loran, tell me, where were you June 25th, 1950?
Oh boy, I can't answer that, Alex.
That was a Sunday.
I can back up a little bit.
Okay.
Before that happened on that day, that Jim Vaught and I enlisted in the reserves at Air Force Reserves at Columbus, Indiana. And I think we started in July of going down there on weekends. And then after the 25th of June, excuse me, we transferred out of that illegally and joined the 424 Field Artillery Battalion in Indianapolis, Indiana.
When were you activated for federal service?
On September the 10th, 1950. We were called in we enlisted into that reserve outfit and artillery, and we was called into an interview with the colonel. And they gave James Vaught a master sergeant because this is what he was in the artillery before. But since I was in the infantry, I wanted to be a cook. And the colonel offered me a choice. He said, you could be a recruit or you could be a staff sergeant if you handled heavy machine gunners. And I said, Colonel, I just didn't be a recruit in the kitchen because I had enough machine guns in World War II. So I went in as a recruit, and the pay scale was lower than a private first class or private. So from there, it was Camp Landing for a short period of time, and then we went to Dothan, Alabama, which is Rucker. Fort Rucker was Camp Rucker then. And this place had really been abandoned, and we had to go in and paint and nail down everything, and it was just a mess. The weeds were about 18 inches high. We got the camp all cleaned up, and then they said we'd been transferred to Camp Polk, Louisiana. Well, we arrived at Camp Polk, and it was the same way as Camp Rucker. Instead of being a cook, I think I was a carpenter and a painter. But anyway, that was in November of 1950. I was in Camp Polk. And I got my first taste in the kitchen. I was in charge of the kitchen, even though I didn't have the rank. and it was Thanksgiving Day. I had to get ready for Thanksgiving. So they had civilian cooks at that time, and he's the one that was in charge of us, so we cooked. We was up all night cooking that darn meal for Thanksgiving. And that was really something that I didn't welcome too much, but we survived. The meal was good. So after that, well, I became involved with the kitchen full time, and then I eventually, the colonel put me in charge of the kitchen, and I went from like recruit, I went to PFC, I went to corporal and so forth, till I got a sergeant first class, and I was actually a mess sergeant. And I think sometimes I wonder why they call it a mess sergeant.
When did you leave for Korea?
I think it was that part of October, the 1st of November. Now, I would like to back up a little bit.
Okay.
While I was in Camp Polk, of course, I was married, and my wife was pregnant. And I think I had 6 weeks to ship out. And she was due. And so she went to the doctor, and, we wanted to get her, have birth, So I took her out in the car. It went over this tough terrain trying to induce it, and it didn't do any good, I don't think. Anyway, my daughter was born at Camp Polk, Louisiana, and that was on September the 15th. And then we got a 2-day pass to come back, and my daughter was 9 days old. I took her we did, to a football game at Wabash College. Now, can you believe that or not? Well, I'm sort of a football fanatic anyway, so anyway, my daughter was born in Camp Polk, Louisiana. And then I went from Camp Polk, Louisiana to Camp Stoneman, California, to ship overseas. And we got a 3 or 4 day pass in San Francisco and lived up a little bit.
Loran, Camp Stoneman no longer exists in Pittsburgh, California. They've torn it down, made it into a park. I found that out last time I visited California.
I wasn't aware of that.
So Camp Stoneman no longer exists.
Yes, okay. Well, sometime that part of October or November, we took off for Korea. And I was in the mess hall, mess sergeant, so I thought, now they're going to get me for KP or something, so I'll just try to hide. Well, they found me, and I was assigned to the kitchen, or a galley, or whatever you want to call it, and those boats, or Navy, I'm not too familiar with the Navy. So I had to work in that kitchen all the way over to Japan.
Where did you land in Japan?
Also what?
Yosu.
OLSO, isn't it?
YUSO, Yuso.
Was it? I don't know.
I don't know. Was it on the southern tip of?
Yes, on the southern tip. And then we took a train on to the other side of Japan, and then we got on another boat and went to Korea from there.
Where did you land there? In Busan?
Yes, landed in Busan.
And from there, what outfit did you join?
I was still with the 424 Field Artillery Battalion.
And where were you assigned in Korea? Do you remember?
With the 8th Army.
8th Army.
We were called I don't want to use that word, a different outfit, So we were assigned to the Corps. I think it was a Corps.
And then you went up to the 38th, I take it.
I think you're right. We was, maybe 60, 70 miles north of Seoul. Now, as long as I was in Korea, I was only in 2 different places. We had 4 batteries, and each battery was assigned to a unit with this 8-inch howitzer. And so all we were, the line was a stalemate. And I think we were there maybe 2 or 3 months at one place, then we moved to another place. And I was only under fire, I think, once or twice. I compare my time in Korea with somebody else's. In the infantry, I had it easy. I was in, like I said, in the kitchen, and with the 8-inch howitzers, we were approximately 7, 8 miles behind the line, and the only thing that we had to worry about was feeding the troops and keeping warm.
Were you ever fired upon?
Yes, this general or colonel, he had an idea. Boy, it was a no-brainer. The 8-inch howitzer had a range of, I think it was 9 miles. Well, if we're 6 miles in back of the front, that means you only get 3 miles ahead of the infantry. So he told us, or assigned us to an area at Hale was called Papasan. You ever hear that?
Papasan? Sure.
What was that, 1081? Or wasn't that the height of it, 1081? Of the mountain?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we went up there and we went fire point blank in that mountain, you know, in those tunnels and so forth. Well, I don't know why he did that, because the airplanes keep, you know, jets going there hammering every day, and they're still there, you know. But anyway, this is what he wanted to do. So went up there and they set the trails out wide and set the 8-inch howitzer in place. And I had to take lunch up to him. So I figured how far it was, but went up there and got in their lunch, and they fired 1 round. And then we got 1 round back, right in the middle of that trail. So I decided that wasn't for us, and so we pulled out. That was the only time I was actually under fire. Another time it always amuses me, we had a second lieutenant. Now I like second lieutenants, but you know, they try, you know. So we're in Korea, and the captain called me in. He said, "You were in World War II as a machine gunner, weren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You know what an MLR is?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, we have a lieutenant replacement, and I want you to help him set up an MLR." And I said, "Sir, I'm a cook. This is why I'm in the kitchen." And he said, "You get your out there and show him what an MLR is and to set it up." So we went out and we put up barbed wire and took hand grenades and stripped them, you know, and got all ready. And so I set that machine gun up, and I set it up 18 inches off the ground. And the lieutenant looked at me and he said, "Now why in the devil would you set a machine gun up 18 inches off the ground?" I said, "Well, I was always taught that, you know, that when you fire that machine gun, you're going to get them in the legs. And if you don't get them in the legs, when you go to hit the ground, you're going to get them a second time." And he said, "Well, that's good enough." So that said 18 inches off the ground.
Right. Did you pick up your Purple Heart in Korea?
No, that was in World War II.
That was in World War II.
Right.
How long were you in Korea? How many months?
Up there 8 months.
8 months.
And the winter. And I'll tell you what, you were there, and I think I've been told that anywhere from 42 to 52 degrees below zero with a wind chill factor, and I believe it.
I believe it. It was cold. Then when you rotated back to the zone of interior, did you get out immediately, or did you go to another army post?
We came back, and here again, on the troop ship, I had to cook. Now, I did this time, I thought, well, now I'm going to really foul them up. So they showed me the bunk on the troop ship. I said, "This is fine." So the first sergeant and a couple of non-coms were down the other end. So I just thought, well, I'll just get up in the morning and I'll go down there and stay with them all day, and they can't locate me. And I won't have to get in that kitchen again. So I did that, and I'm sitting down there. Now, this is the first day. It must have been about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. Here comes the corporal, the orderly. Says, "Sergeant Rutledge, just report to the kitchen." Now, I don't know if somebody set me up or not, but there it was, another 15 days in the kitchen again. So, but anyway, we got back, and I even forget, I think we landed in San Francisco. Another amusing point, I was in Korea there, and I had this magazine, I'm thumbing through it, and it said bikini bathing suits, leopard design, you know. So I thought, well, I'll just have some fun with this. So I wrote that company. And I said, my wife is going to meet me at San Francisco at the port of the port there, and she's going to meet me. and she would like to have a swimming suit, bikini, and she's going to meet me in that bikini. And so I left it at that. And Juanita had told me later, said she was living in Annapolis with First Sergeant's wife, said somebody knocked the door, and it was a representative from Life magazine. They wanted to put her on the cover in that bikini. And she says, there's no way. She said she wasn't even going to San Francisco, let alone that bikini. So anyway, I was just a joke. I played on her. And I had that bikini. I don't know for how long, but we lost it in the movie so forth. But anyway, we got back and went to Camp Carson, Colorado. And we wanted to fly back to in Annapolis, so we went to the Air Force, and see if they had a flight out to Annapolis. So we stood around and waited, and pretty soon the operational officer came out and said, yes, there's a plane going to Dayton. Now I said, there's one thing about this. This is a general's plane, and you have to have your own food, because he's not going to sit there and eat steak sandwiches and see you guys back there drilling. So you're going to have to get something, so when he takes out his box lunch or whatever, then you're going to have to take yours out. So we ran to PX. I don't know what we got. It was this much of quick food. And then we landed at Dayton. So, and then from there I even forgot I can't remember how we got from Dayton back to Crawfordsville.
Then when did you get out?
June 8, 1952.
After you got back to Crawfordsville, did you have to go back to another post for a while, or were you out?
No, I was out.
How did you sense the reaction of the people back home to our efforts in Korea?
I had a hard time at where I worked. I won't get into it. But people thought I was crazy for enlisting. They thought I was stupid. Had people, even my own brother, join the Guard during that time, and I was sort of resentful in a way. But after time, it went away. But it was hard to take. And another thing too, that I was gone approximately 2 years. And at this company I worked with, they had like apprenticeships. You had to complete 5 years. Well, when I got back, most of them were off apprenticeship, or near being off, and then I had 2 years to make up. So there was a little resentment there. That, of course, they thought I was stupid for going in the first place, but I think I got more out of it than I gave. I really do.
I agree. I also ran into the same reaction. I've talked to several other people, and they also felt the same way. Loran, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Enjoyed it.